Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, November the 9th. And today we're going to bring back a great friend of our show, Mailyn Salabarria, a fellow Cuban, although maybe a little different generation, but nevertheless, we're all Cubans. So let me say hello to Mailyn. Welcome, Mailyn. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Hi, Silvio. Thanks again for the invitation. It's always a good time and a huge pleasure to have these conversations with you. And now that we have the camera on air, I just realized that we are dressing with the same colors. Have we planned like this?
No, we didn't, but it is interesting that we share the color red,
That's
which is
right.
a particular color of interest in this campaign. So that
Definitely.
let me assure the audience that at least from my standpoint, it was a total coincidence that I'm wearing my red shirt. But it's Saturday. Normally, on a regular business
Mhm.
day, I would not use a colorful red shirt. I would use the boring white or blue shirt, that most men wear. But on Saturday, I get out of my zone, if you know what I mean, and I decide to get a little bit more colorful. So that's why we're doing red. And no, but thank you. Well, go red, go red. You know, the
Exactly.
it's funny though, and you mentioned red because for so many years I hated the red color for reasons that you may realize the same reasons, right? Because there's a red flag that we both hate. So,
Yes.
so for years I hated the red color, but here recently I've begun to like it a little bit more.
We kind of like have learned to embrace that there is a whole different meaning to just a
Right.
particular
So
color
yeah,
too.
a certain flag I hate, but a certain red color political party I like. So now, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you left Cuba. You and I left at a different time, but just give us a little background of your story, Maylene.
Yes, I definitely did. I always tell all my audiences and people that I talk to that I was born in Cuba and
Yes.
made in the US, American by choice, born and raised in Castro's Cuba when he was still alive, left in 2001 and have built my family, my career, and everything else in between since then in the United States. I'm very proud of it. So it was a very hard leap of faith to do that kind of like life changing where you literally stuff your entire life in two suitcases and arrive in a new country and a new life with new family, with no family, new friends. Again, starting everything from the scratch. It was very hard, but definitely I haven't looked back since then.
Yes, and now that you mentioned that, it was a hard. Of course, I was 12 years old when I left. So when you're 12, you don't really have responsibilities, if you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. But I always, as time passes, I think more and more about my parents having come here. My father with a wife and three kids, my mother, all five of us, and how much I admire and respect the sacrifices that they made for us three, my brother, my sister, and I. So I know exactly what you
Mm-hmm.
mean about it's funny, all we had was the clothes we were wearing when we left. I don't know if it was the same for you, but at the time that we left, we were just able to take whatever we were wearing and I think one suitcase that everybody put their stuff in. So we
Mm-hmm.
had literally one suitcase for five people.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
so
was different and quite hard back then too.
yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit. I want to get into a few topics tonight, but today is the 35th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. My
Mm-hmm.
generation grew up with the Berlin Wall. It was the symbol of freedom. It was the wall that separated communism and freedom. So we were all aware of it, el muro de Berlin, as they used to
Mm-hmm.
call it in Spanish. And I was always aware of it. You were always getting reports of people trying to escape and all of that. And it
Mm-hmm.
fell on this day in 1989, 35 years ago. Tell me your experience of this, if not directly, because you were maybe too young. What do you remember in Cuba? What did you hear in Cuba? What did your family say?
It was really, really like a awkward, I would say, situation. I was still in Cuba when the Berlin Wall fell. I think it was my first year of high school. And obviously, at first, we got everything delayed. news-wise, everything was delayed. Everything was filtered in the media, controlled by the party, exactly like it is today. And by the time they started let it go, like a little drops of information here and there, it was clearly very manipulated. I think it was close to 1992 or 1993 when my brother and my sister, who are German and they still live in what used to be communist Germany, visit us in Cuba for the first time. And that's when we were able to sit down and talk, with zero filters about what was the reality that they lived there, what was ours, and what exactly happened when the wall fell. Then fast forward time, when I left Cuba in 2001 was the first time that I visited Berlin. I went to visit my siblings, and needless to say, the first place where they took me was to see the remains of the wall, what used to be some of the gates, some segments and areas where they still have the area on the ground where they have the mines, where they have the barbed wires and all that. And all I can tell you is that it was like surreal, for a lack of a better word, experience, because it was an avalanche of emotions. When someone with my background and the memories that I have living in a communist country, because I left Cuba as a young adult, everything comes and hits you in the face like a Mack truck. You start seeing those scenes and, reading the little biographies and testimonies, stories that they have in different segments of the wall. Nowadays, it's still like an outdoor museum. And it's a mix of like the joy and, the joyful feeling or energy of seeing that is not longer there, that people were able to get free. It's like these heart-wrenching stories of how many people were killed trying to cross that wall. It's thinking, for example, when I was a kid in Cuba, we used to listen to the song of Nino Bravo that is called Libre, and thinking that it was just like a really cute ballad, romantic ballad in Spanish from the late 70s and the 80s, and realizing only after I was in the United States that the story behind that song is the testimony of a young German that was killed by the German communist government trying to cross the wall. So like I said, it's like a very, very outward mix of emotions. Like 2 weeks ago, I came back from the Reagan Museum in Santa Barbara. I was doing a presentation for students at the Young Americans Foundation. And when I entered the lobby, the first thing that I face, it's a segment of the Berlin Wall that was gifted to President Reagan, and they have it there in the lobby. And I remember telling my host, I'm gonna need a minute to kind of like, compose myself, because this type of thing, again, bring up memories and testimonies and stories of our lives that the majority of the people around us in the United States cannot even relate to.
Right,
so again,
that's right. You're right.
It's a very mixed experience, but at the same time, regardless of how you remember what happened when the wall fell, remember how you saw it back then, how you see it now, I think that one key lesson or one key idea remains the same, Silvio. And it's like, it really doesn't matter how many walls, how many barbed wires, how many mines these totalitarian regimes try to impose of us in the history of mankind. The human being will always thrive for freedom, because it's our natural state, and it really doesn't matter how much the powers that be try to block that. We will always pursue freedom and the right to pursue freedom, even when the high price that we pay is literally dying for it.
Dying, yeah, no, I agree. I remember writing something in Babalu a few years ago, and I know some of our friends from Babalu are watching this. But I remember a few years ago, I wrote, I think it was on the 30th anniversary of the Berlin Wall, that I wrote a little reminder of the Berlin Wall. And the last paragraph went something like this. I said that the story of the Berlin Wall has to be taught to every generation for the reason you just said, exactly the reason you just said, that we all want to be free and will often risk our lives to be free. And I have not personally been to the Berlin Wall like you have, but I did go to the George Bush Museum at Texas A&M. Of course, he was the president because he had followed President Reagan, and he was actually the president when it happened. And in the George Bush Museum at Texas A&M, there is a lot about the Berlin Wall because he had something to do with it, as well as President Reagan did. And there is, to me, the most moving story of all is the story of the first person, the first casualty of the very first man who tried to cross, a young man who tried to cross. And that is such an incredible story. I think it happened, of course, very early in the history of the Berlin Wall. But you're exactly right, what you just said about what it means to people like you and I who cherish freedom. And you certainly much longer than I did lived under communism, but still, even though I didn't live under communism as long as you did, I hate it probably as much as you do in terms of what it does to people. All right, well, let's talk a little bit before we get, I want to talk about your article, and then we'll finish with the U.S. elections.
Okay.
But tell me what's going on in Cuba. I just saw a story that La Habana, there were some apagones, as they like to say, in La Habana, and that some people were out in the streets. Somebody's making videos, and I appreciate whoever's doing it, but somebody's making videos, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's some tourists who are doing this and getting them out. But so we're grateful to that. But tell me, what is the latest information that you have from this ongoing apagon in Cuba that never seems to stop?
Yeah, it is the same old. Just like a quick reference to the article or piece that you were mentioning, it was a small piece that of mine published last week at the International Policy Digest that do a quick analysis of exactly what happened in Cuba about 2 weeks ago when we have all this power grid collapse, and which are the real reasons that are behind this situation that we're seeing in Cuba now. The piece was published probably a few days ago, and in the last 24 hours we started getting reports all over X on social media and private groups on WhatsApp on how the island has been now over 90 hours without electricity. Again, two of the main plants in Matanzas and El Vedado, they tried to restart it after repairs and they completely collapsed the grid. The new thing that we can see now, and I highly encourage all of our listeners and viewers to go to X and look for that information, is like you said, a lot of people on the island are doing short and live videos and sharing them both on live on Instagram and on Twitter or X now. You can see that, I don't know if they are people residing in the island, tourists, whoever they are. I am very grateful that they're putting out the information in real time for the rest of the world to see. The interesting case in this situation is kind of like a twofold. Number one is that usually the capital, La Habana, is spared from the big blackouts and all that because they know, number one, is the highest density population on the island, and number two, they want to keep people, at least in the capital, happy so they don't take up all the streets and disconvolute the entire country. Sadly, in the rural areas, in the provinces in Cuba, they are the ones that are always getting the worst brunt of this energy negligence, if you would say. So the interesting thing that started to happen in the last 90 hours, as I was saying, is that now it is the neighborhoods in Havana, the suburban working class neighborhoods in Havana. Remember, these blackouts are never going to happen in the hotels for tourists. These blackouts are never going to happen in the areas of Miramar where the diplomats and the foreigner live. These blackouts are never going to happen in these areas where the high elite of the military, the Gaesa, the ministries, and the government live. We're talking here about your average Cuban Joe neighborhood.
Now, pardon me for a second, Matt. What neighborhoods would that be? I mean, just some names.
So we are talking about, I was going to get there now, is the neighborhoods of the working class in Havana, like El Cerro, Guanabacoa, Nuevo Vedado, Artemisa. These are the ones that now in the last, like I said, 2-3 days have been going over 90 hours without power. And people are starting to bang in the pots and the pans in their neighborhoods out of the windows in the middle of the blackout. And that's what we're seeing on the videos on X, on social media, on Instagram. And most of them tell you which neighborhood of Havana is. And then the irony after all this, especially actually, again, going back to that commentary that I published last week, that we can probably share the link at some point in the, in the video when we share it, is that yes, it is not the blame of the United States embargo, and there is no amount of free and cheap oil from Venezuela, Russia, or Mexico that is going to solve the problem of the, critical energy failure in Cuba. The root cause of this is that collectivist centralized economy in socialist countries don't work, and they create a humanitarian crisis that affect the regular average people in those countries, not the elites that have always lived the right way. And then it is kind of like ironic that in this last incident that started, like I said, 72 hours ago, we have Diaz-Canel, which is, by the way, the unelected appointed heir of the Castro's plantation in Cuba, coming out on the news. Again, it remains to be seen who is listening his words when the entire capital is in a huge blackout without power, but I digress. And then this guy has the nerve to come out on national TV and say, well, this is just a hate campaign, and this is just fake news that is being propagated on social media and the enemy's media outlets by haters of the great revolution of Cuba. And I'm like, man, we have live videos of neighborhoods in Havana less than 8 hours ago, pounding pots and pans in black houses that have been going over 12 hours by now. It's like, come on, get a reality check. But apparently that's too much to ask.
Apparently, Mailyn, the enemies of the state, according to Diaz-Canel, are the tourists who are staying at the hotels, who are filming these things. So, I mean, the people who are bringing dollars into the country, I guess, are the ones who are the enemies. But I don't, I don't mean to laugh, because it is very, very painful, and I don't mean to laugh. But when you say that nobody's listening to him in Cuba, that's exactly right.
Exactly.
I mean, who can listen to it in a country where no electricity? I guess if you have a little transistor radio, or if your car is driving, you can listen to it that way. But the overwhelming majority of the population has no idea that he even said this. So,
exactly. And it contradicts. And let me tell you.
Let me ask you one quick question. This is just curiosity of mine, because, it's been a long time since I've lived in Cuba. When you say Nuevo Vedado, is that related to Vedado? That's where our family lives.
It's just, Vedado is like the old neighborhood that you probably remember from your family. And then Nuevo Vedado, let's say that is just like an area where that same neighborhood grew up a little bit.
We used to live in Vedado. That was the last place we lived in Cuba, because my father had a job in a bank called Banco Continental Cubano, and he was moved around the island, so I had a chance, as a kid, to live in Sabana Grande, in Hatibonico, and all these great towns where my father was assigned, Hatibonico, Ciego de Ávila, Santi Espíritus, and then La Habana at the very end. And we lived, you probably know where it is. Paseo was the name of the street going north-south, right?
Yep.
And the streets had letters. I think was the letter. And we lived, we literally lived like 3 blocks from the Malecón.
Yeah,
that is how close we were. So, but people used to call that Vedado.
It's still called the same. So they call Nuevo Vedado. Let's just imagine it's just one segment of the same neighborhood that grew up a little bit, but it's just the same area. Again, and this is kind of like what I find interesting this time is that that riots and people protesting in the street in Cuba is always something that happens very organically, but very kind of like scattered everywhere too, because the repression is out and about right away. But what I find interesting in this case is that number one is those neighborhoods in Havana that they know they are surrounded by police stations, by the secret police and whatnot, the ones that are pounding the pots and pans in the middle of the blackout. Then we have Diaz-Canel coming out with this, idiotic response that it makes us think, are you really controlling your own authoritarian cabinet? Because the electric company, put out a report in their social media saying that these 2 power plants have failed when they tried them to incorporate it in the national grid. So it's like, People are quoting information from your own government, and you're coming out with this excuse that is fake news, put it out by the haters. Somebody in your communications team needs to be fired, and it shows.
Well,
right?
no, I agree. And I mean, it is sad. You laugh, but it's so sad because you know that people are hurting. By the way, I just want to say one more thing about my life in Cuba as a kid. I got to know La Carretera Central real well because every place I lived was connected to La Carretera Central, Ciego de Ávila. Well, not Sabula Grande, but Las Villas, I guess, Santa Clara was the place. So Hatibonico, I mean, all these places that La Carretera Central would go through were places that I lived as a little boy. And I remember many times with my parents on the bus, going down Carretera Central and Los Elevados in Ciego de Ávila and all that kind of stuff that you probably remember.
It's still the same, and I remember the same road trips because all my cousins and aunts and my grandmother and all the family on my dad's side of the family, they are between Ciego de Ávila, Chamba, Punta Alegre, Camagüey. So it's all the same area. Besides that Carretera Central is like the only highway that has connected Cuba from one point to the other since forever. So
since it was built. And I remember as a little boy in Cuba in Ciego de Ávila that there was the principal city, but there was a bus that would always go by every morning and go into Moron. Well, I guess Moron was a town nearby, right? Anyway, it just brings, sorry to deviate, but it just brought me back some memories of Cuba. So what you mentioned, the oil. So this money that they got from Mexico, or this oil that they got from Mexico, I mean, it's just for show because
it's just a drop in a bucket of an inefficient system and a power structure that is already crumbling and collapsing. And before we move into another topic, I want to put something for the record, because I know a lot of people are going to eat up, whatever appeal the Cuban government wants to put out. The Cuban government is already trying to spin the story of this second power grid collapse on the hurricane, on the storm Rafael. I want people to go back at the calendars on their smartphones and realize that the second power grid collapse in Cuba this time, it started before the storm hit Artemisa and the areas of Havana, of South Havana, where the storm came through. Clearly, the government is trying to manipulate it now to put the blame, as usual, in the embargo, the evil American empire, and the hurricane. But this was not when this second collapse happened. The power grid went down for a second time before the storm Rafael had even reached the south shoreline of Cuba. So just wanted to put that out there, and just the reminder to everybody that could be listening to us and following this news about Cuba, Silvio, is that there is nothing and no one else to blame about the crisis in Cuba but the communist government and the disastrous socialist centralized economic policies that have ruined the country for 65 years.
Absolutely.
We're talking a society.
Exclamation point. Everything you say, exclamation point.
In a society where the median salary is 2,000 Cuban pesos and 1 dozen of eggs, when you can find them, cost 4,000 Cuban pesos. That's the Econ 101 class that everybody outside of Cuba need to learn to understand where is the real cause and where is the real responsibility of the disaster that Cuba is facing right now. And like you said, yes, we laugh about it, but you know what? That is the Caribbean nature. We make fun of our own misery. If we don't do that, Silvio, it's literally a coping skill. If we don't make fun and laugh of our own misery, we will have not made it alive for the 65 years that those communists have been ruining our lives for generations in Cuba.
Absolutely. And it's kind of it's laughter, but it's laughter that hurts, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, absolutely.
Kind of that really hurts. Well, let me, we were talking about the Cubans. The Cubans were a big factor in the Florida elections. They were a huge factor, just like the Mexicans were here in Texas. But let's talk a little bit about these elections, because I think it's fair to say that it was Hispanic support, Cuban, Mexican here, Puerto Rican, elsewhere, that really pushed the Republicans to have a pretty good night. So how do you see it?
I think it was an impressive example to be alive to witness. And I think that regardless of which country in Latin America we are, we know all the labels. We have been slapped in this country by the progressive left for many years. I think it really doesn't matter whether it was Cuban Americans, Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, the Muslim community in Minnesota. I think that we sent out a clear message, and it is, we are done with your labeling. We are done with your divide and conquer. We are done with the left woke insanity. We are Americans, and we are voting as Americans. And you need to stop manipulating the things that are important for us. And I think that was a clear, resounding message that we saw for minority voters and voters that are now American citizens but were born in different countries, to just stop the insanity train that the progressive left have been poisoning this country with for so many years.
And poisoning is the right word, because what they have done to the young people is brutal. What they have done to what they're doing to young people in the universities makes me angry. You know,
so I have some examples of their reactions to read you. So just to wrap it up, I know that most people probably know exactly what happened, but we have the example in Miami-Dade County in Florida that went completely red. GOP for the first time since 1988 was the last time that an entire county in South Florida voted for the GOP candidate. We have the similar example in Osceola County in Florida, which is a huge Puerto Rican community that live there. We saw Pennsylvania, again, a huge Boricua community also voting for the GOP candidate. And then we have the examples of all the borders counties in Texas that were completely red. Yeah. I think that this was, again, a very solid message from an entire coalition of minority voters that clearly send the message that say, we are tired of your divide and conquer. We are tired of, you trying to own our brain and the things that are important for us in, when it comes to voting, and not listening what we're saying. So I think that was a glorious response to see, and definitely it was, a very eye-opening lesson, hopefully, for the Democratic Party and the progressive left in this country.
We hope so. We hope so. I think it will be, because nothing changes the party more than losing like this. And it's like anything else. If you lose, you tend to learn from it. But I'm so happy that you brought up this poisoning of our young people. I was on Univision here in the Dallas area the other day talking, and they were asking me as to why did I think that it changed in Texas so much. And I said, I think the problem is, and I wasn't being critical of Univision because I'm always happy when they invite me, but I said to them, the problem is that a lot of Democrats think that all that Hispanics want to talk about is immigration and DACA, when in fact there's much more. Yeah, well, there's so much more. Now, of course, immigration and DACA affects some of us, and that's fine, and that's an issue. But the other issues like the border, the disaster on the border, the economy, one issue that gets overlooked a lot by the Democrats is the impact of going after the petroleum industry here in South Texas. We have areas of South Texas over by Corpus Christi with huge refineries. And who do you think works there?
Yep.
The people who live in that area. But let me bring up another point, and I know this is close to your heart because you have spoken a lot about this in your career as a public speaker. I was listening to Chuck Todd, of all people, of NBC the other day, and he was saying that one issue that has brought the Republican Party and Hispanics together, whether it's Florida or Texas, is the issue of school choice. That a lot of Hispanic parents want that choice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing that I think.
Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely agree with that. It's not the only one, but again, it's one of those examples, like you were saying, the Democratic Party and the progressive left have like this super arrogant entitled mentality that they own our vote because they give us handouts and things like that, and because we're immigrants. It doesn't work like that. Like you said, yes, immigration and DACA and all those issues impact some of us, but when we are here, we are American voters like any other American, regardless of the country or they came from or the language they speak at home. We want a solid economy in the country. We're worried about inflation. We want a school choice. We want safe communities. We want a safe border. We want the same thing that any American, regardless of where they are, we want. And we want also respect and consideration to our traditional family values.
Right.
Like you mentioned, education and school choice is a great example of it. There is countless of statistics. We would not have time to mention them all in the show. There is countless statistics of how school choice, ESA's accounts, vouchers, and charter schools impact hugely, proportionately higher improvement numbers in minority families, minority students, and students that come from low-income families. So whoever in any party on any campaign tries to tell us that that's not important for me, it's like you are disrespecting my family. You are disrespecting the values and the thing that I came to this country to pursue. And that is not okay. So I think that it's a combination of all that. Like I was saying before, being sick and tired of push and fed this, this agenda and these talking points that because we're Latinos and we are minorities, the Democratic Party own me. I'm like, dude, newsflash, I left a communist dictatorship 23 years ago. Nobody owns me. Show me the contract where I consent for you to determine which are my main political points and concerns when it comes to my vote. Right. Trust me, you are never going to find that. Right. So I think it was a clear message. And frankly, Silvio, I think that one of the top ones, there's two, I think that they're very top. One of them, I think it is that, man, they came after the kids.
You're exactly right. Yeah,
you never go full retard coming after our kids, okay?
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that if you want to get on the wrong side of Hispanics, go after the kids.
You don't come after the kids. You don't do that. And this is like the most important, I think, core message, not only of this election, it's been kind of like rolling out way before, is that when it comes to our kids, it doesn't matter if we're registered Republicans or registered Democrats, Silvius. We are mom and dad first. We want our kids to have a school choice. We want our kids to have a good education. We want to protect our kids until it's time for them to take on their life. That kind of value does not have political lines behind it. You mess up with them. The progressive radical left agenda in this country went full retard and came after the Hispanic kids. Lesson learned. You don't do that.
No, you don't do that. You don't tell a Hispanic father that a guy who thinks he's a girl is going to compete with his daughter.
Exactly. Or that my daughter have to pee in a bathroom with a boy in front of her. It doesn't happen like that. No, and I think in my opinion, I believe that's one of the biggest factors why, when we look at the statistics and the data of the Hispanic vote in these presidential elections, you see that the highest percentage is Latino men voting for Trump. Yes. Why? Because they are sick and tired of being called with the stupid toxic masculinity when all they're trying to do is protect their families, guarantee they have a roof over their heads, they have food on their tables, and that their children have a good education and that their girls are safe in school and in their sports.
They're just trying to be fathers.
They are trying to be fathers, exactly.
Fathers and
husbands and heads of their families. Yeah.
That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to be fathers and husbands. They're trying to protect their family, do the best for their family, and they're being called toxic masculinity.
Exactly.
Give me a break. I mean, that doesn't register in the Hispanic community at all. I mean, that is as you say, the easiest way to lose us. Okay, look, we're just about out of time, Mailyn, and you're such a you're such an amazing guest that I could do 6 hours with you, except I don't have that much time. So we have a couple of minutes left, but I would
Okay.
you to just update us a little bit on any link that you may have. If you want to send it to me, I'll add it to the show information. If the article that you wrote, it was in which magazine or which?
It was in the International Policy Digest. It was a great collaboration with the Dissident Project. So yes, I will send you those links as well of a couple of pieces that very good colleagues of mine have put out together with statistics and numbers about this turnout in the Latino vote. I would just like to close with two main ideas. Number one is that this shift, not only in the Latino, but I would say minority vote nationwide, has brought out the true colors of the progressive left, this country. So the greatest irony is that these are the people that have been the front soldiers of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I love minorities and this and that, as long as you vote for what I tell you and as long as you don't think for yourself. And I think that a quick stroll on X, on social media, where people write Latino vote in the search box, or if you want to write Latinx, is going to show you more than what you are prepared to see. I wanted to read only one that I saved of this guy that I found on X, where he said, does anyone know where the headquarters of Latinos is? I'm going to march down there and give them a piece of my mind for no voting the way they were supposed to. I'm like, dude, get a grip. Again, who told you that you own my brain and the principles and the concerns and the issues that I vote on? I mean, we are talking, this is like arrogance level 385. When these woke, with savior complex, progressive left people come thinking in public with no filter that they literally own the Latino or the minority vote, and they are the ones that know better how we should be voting. Again, a quick stroll in social media, I try to keep it, ladylike. You're going to find a lot of bumps in there, but their actions speak louder than whatever DEA report they want to write, trying to tell you that they are super inclusive and loving diversity. Clearly, it's not the truth.
Oh, absolutely.
And the last point is that it's a very simple one. Stop the woke colonization of our mother tongue. We told you to drop the stupid Latinx. We cannot even pronounce that stuff in Spanish. It tells you that you are an arrogant prick who doesn't speak Spanish, and clearly you try to throw a Latinx at the Nochebuena or Christmas party with any Mexican and Cuban abuela, and I guarantee you're not trying the tamales and you're not eating congri that night.
No, anybody who mentions the word Latinx in front of a Cuban grandmother is going to be, she's going to beat the crap out of you and send you somewhere for that evening. Yeah. But Latinx is a good example of how disconnected these people are.
Totally,
that I know, that there's not a single Hispanic that I know who uses that word or even knows what that word means. That's a college professor word that they use in their little progressive meetings.
But they have trickled it down to popular culture. And then talk about stereotyping and being racist, Silvio. Nothing screams racism, ignorance, and stereotyping more than trying to change a language that was built in being gender for a fake sense of equality in like this huge, posturing and victor signaling to make you feel superior and that you're better. I'm like, come on, maybe, hopefully after last week, all these idiots got the memo. That's all I can hope.
I sure do. I hope they did, because if they didn't get the memo, they're going to get a bigger one the next time. That's all I can tell you. But listen, you were saying X, you mentioned X. We're going to be posting this on X as soon as we can, sometime the next hour after or so. So you'll be able to find us there and share it with your friends. But I want to personally thank you for your time. And it's always a real treat to visit with you, because, I think all of us Cubans are connected one way or another, even though if we come from different generations. We all seem to have I guess what we all have in common is that we hate communism. And that hatred of communism is what allows us to talk freely and sometimes disagree, but we never disagree on the big thing, which is
Exactly. It is always a uniting, it is always a uniting force. And again, this is another lesson for the progressive left, not only in the United States, but all over the world. It's like, dude, we have seen that stuff up close and personal. We can see the red flags, pun totally intended, from miles away. Miles away. It doesn't matter if he's dressed in green fatigues and carrying a Russian AK-47, or if he's showing up like nowadays under a big state, huge state, corrupted with over-regulation of our individual life. At the end of the day, it's the same. And we can see those signs from miles away.
As my late mother used to say, my late mother, who was born in Ciego de Ávila, hometown that you know that city very well.
Yes.
My late mother was born in Ciego de Ávila, and she had a great sense of humor, a lot of common sense, like a lot of Cuban mothers do. And she used to say, whenever this topic came up, she would say, "You know what? We saw that movie, and it doesn't end well.
It doesn't end well.
I don't care, I don't care what characters you put in it. It doesn't end well. So we saw the movie." And my mother would always put it that way. But you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and being able to put this, little rants and hot takes out there for your audience.
It's always a pleasure for me to give you the microphone, as they say, and have you join us. And we'll have it up on Babalu. And we'll have it up on X, and I'm going to see if I can get my good friends at American Thinker to put it up as well. So you may be really famous by Sunday night.
No!
All right.
Thanks again. It was a great pleasure.
Yes, same here. Have a good weekend, and my best to you and all your family.
You too. Thank you.
All right. I tell you, that was quite a treat. Talking to Mailyn. She's an absolutely wonderful speaker, an absolutely dedicated person to this cause of freedom. And, I'll say it again, when you are Cuban, you understand freedom maybe better than most. And I'm not knocking anybody. Other people have gone through it as well. But when you are Cuban, as my late mother used to say, we've seen this movie and it doesn't end well. No, it doesn't. It ends really bad. So don't fall for it, because the ending is not going to be nice. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We have a couple of other videos on the archives right now. We had one with George Rodriguez that we recorded on Friday about the Texas election in more detail about what happened in Texas. And we also have about the election an interview that we did with Frank Burke, author and businessman, and we talked with him a little bit about the election. So just a little bit of information, trying to do our best to keep you informed about the election. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.